this is how I think. This is what I, speculate the investigation started to some degree. When Cassie first came out and said that she was being abused by him, etc., right? And they might have got tips and everything else like this from before, right? From the tip line or whatever. What I think more than likely happened was they started talking to a couple of people, going out, doing a couple knock and talks. Hey, this seems a little weird. These women keep coming forward and complaining about, nefarious sexual activity with Diddy from dating back from the 90s, whatever. This is a little weird. And at that point, especially if you're dealing with someone high profile, after the second or third or fourth interview where you might have a good witness or two, you're going to the United States Attorney's Office early on, right? And you're saying, look, this is the target. This is who he is. This is what we think we can build, etc. We talked to these people, whatever. And I think in a case like this, they more than likely had the U.S. Attorney's Office ear early on. And, I've always said this, the feds and the United States Attorney's Office, right? They like clout. They like the ability to prosecute high-profile individuals. It's going to hit the news. It's going to be big, a big W for them, a big press release. So I'm assuming once they figured out who the guy was, right, Diddy, they probably were working with the United States Attorney's Office fairly early on this, is what I predict. Given the nature of who the individual was. And also keep in mind, there was a successful prosecution with R. Kelly prior to this. So, if I'm not mistaken, some of the AUSAs that were on that case were also involved in this R. Kelly case.
All right,
are involved in this Diddy case that were involved in the R. Kelly case. Sorry.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question, right? And you mentioned your prediction, and I guess you could expound on your prediction for charges. And I would love to hear you explain that before. But in following up to that, I also want you to, answer the question of, okay, if because you mentioned, racketeering.
Yeah.
And usually when people are in a racket, it's more than one. It's just not a singular individual. And maybe I'm wrong, but do you believe that this indictment solely falls on Sean Diddy Combs, or maybe there are 3, 4, 5, 6, a dozen other people, maybe not charged with everything, but with kind of ancillary people who the prosecutor is going to try to dance along, maybe in a trial, to say, hey, these were the people that were doing his bidding, but he was making a call. What do you think?
Yeah, so the reason why they're going to have to use the racketeering statute, right, is because a lot of these crimes happened a long time ago, right? Like some of these crimes are beyond the statute of limitations. So in order for the prosecutors to kind of bring in some of those allegations that happened in the 90s or maybe even the 80s or early 2000s or whatever, they're going to need to go ahead and prove that he was committing these crimes for a period of time, right? Racketeering activity, right? And the criminal organization is ongoing, or the criminal enterprise is ongoing. So that is why they're going to have to do this under the auspice of Rico, so that they can go ahead and say, look, we're going to bring in all these other crimes, right, that were done decades ago, because he's been doing it for a while. So sex trafficking is considered a crime that falls under the Rico Act, right? There's drug trafficking, there's violence, witness intimidation, there's extortion, all these different types of crimes that they typically had there historically to go after organized crime like the mafia, whatever. As long as they can prove that he's still committing these crimes to some degree, they can bring in all those allegations from prior, but they need to do it under the RICO statute to be able to bring them in, so they get around this whole statute of limitations problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I spoke about that before too. Could you, so sex trafficking, and I've heard a few, us YouTubers on here, obviously the 99.9, and you're obviously the 0.1% that has worked in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Like, we're either like ghetto lawyers, or we're going off like what we either know from either our experience dealing with the criminal justice system, or just kind of like looking at these things a lot. Could you explain sex trafficking? Because I've heard, like, for example, like Whack 100 said, yo, well, if you fly a girl out and you fuck her, and if she alleges that there's an abuse there, well, the person crossed state lines, this and third, it's sex trafficking. And I'm like, damn, that's kind of like a very loose and broad, interpretation of what sex trafficking could be. What is sex trafficking? And where would a federal authority start to look at it in?
So I'm going to just kind of give the more practical agent side of it, right? So the thing with sex trafficking, and this is very contrary to what people think, it's not as common as people think it is, right? What people always conflate sex trafficking with is human smuggling, bringing in illegal aliens into the United States for a sum or a fee. Those individuals are brought into the United States. Their families are being extorted, etc. That's human smuggling. Now, does it lead to human trafficking later on when they get into the United States and they're forced to work jobs or whatever it may be? Of course. But people often conflate human smuggling with human trafficking, which are two completely different crimes. One is, AUSC 1324. The other one is a far more serious crime that's 18 USC, right? Which is the criminal code versus the immigration code. So that's number one. Number two, as far as sex trafficking goes, it's actually fairly hard to prove. A lot of the times when people think that they got a sex trafficking case, and I know this because I've been on so many of these different raids, is what ends up happening is you bust a prostitution ring, right? You thought, oh yeah, we had these girls, they're being trafficked, whatever. You talk to them and they all love their pimp. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to say that they were being held or whatever. Some of them are lying to protect them. Some of them were trafficked or whatever. But the point is that it's very difficult to get witnesses because sometimes they don't want to necessarily cooperate. So what ends up happening is you just end up getting everyone arrested for solicitation charges, right? Ends up being just a prostitution ring bust. Now, the way to get around that though, right, which is how the feds come in a lot of the times, is if the girls are under 18, it's an automatic human trafficking charge. Automatic.
Wow.
So that's where they're going to get them. Is some of these girls, from what I understand, were under 18 at the time when Diddy was messing with them and bringing them around in different states. That's where I think they're going to get them. I mean, I'll have to look at the indictment to see, but this is my prediction.
Okay, let me interject and add. So on one of the particular civil cases that he has is that there was a young woman who was 17 that was supposedly, she met someone that worked for his label. That person said, "Hey, I think Diddy would like you." They called Diddy. Diddy spoke to the girl, spoke to the person, and then within a matter of hours, the girl got on a private jet to fly to Diddy.
Damn.
And allegedly was around him. By the way, this girl, I'll post it here. I'll send you a link if you want to show it on, your stream.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Or you could even Google 17-year-old Diddy. There's multiple like articles about it. Her face is blurred out. She was seen sitting on his lap. Okay, there's a New York Post. I'll post it in the chat here. I don't know if.
Okay, yeah, because Bill's on the computer, so he could do it.
Okay, all right. So Bills, you could just click from the chat. It's a chat between me and Myron, and it's a New York Posting. It says Sean Diddy Combs accused of drugging and gang R-wording a 17-year-old in a new suit. There's photos of this girl sitting on his lap. Obviously, she's not shown for obvious reasons. She was 17 at the time.
We got the link, yeah.
Her lawsuit against him says she was gang R-worded, but what's also very important is she was 17.
Yep.
Here's the important part. I think she was in, I believe, let me make sure, Detroit, I believe, and then he was either in New York, and let me just make sure, chat, I'm sorry. Yes, the woman says she met Pierre, who was an executive at Bad Boys Entertainment. So she met one of his workers in Detroit at a lounge, and then essentially he called Sean Diddy Combs on the phone and convinced the teen to fly to New York City. Before leaving the lounge, they said the worker took her to the bathroom where he smoked crack with her and apparently had her have sex with him first. Yeah. Then he put her in a private jet from Pontiac, Michigan. She landed in Teterboro, New Jersey, which this is where Jay-Z and everybody who got a private jet who goes to New York lands in Jersey at Teterboro. That's fact.
Okay.
And yeah, they drove to his studio, and she has pictures to prove she's with him.
Yeah. So
would that be considered as sex trafficking?
Yeah, that's a cut and dry human trafficking right there at the federal level because she's not 18. He moved her in between states. That affects interstate commerce. So that's where they're going to get them. And I know some of the audience here might be shocked by me saying that human trafficking isn't as prevalent as people think, but it really isn't. It's really the human smuggling that is the extremely common thing that people tend to conflate because they're two completely different crimes. But the big way, and I know this from being on human trafficking task forces and working with these guys closely, a lot of the times when they do these busts, what ends up happening is it's prostitution ring and they don't want to cooperate against a pimp. They're not really being abused. They're doing it willingly and they're of age. However, if they catch a girl there that's underage, then it morphs into human trafficking automatically because that woman can't consent.
I have a question.
That's how they get the nexus.
If the girl lied about her age, does that matter?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So if she's 17 and she was being, and there was a pimp and she was being prostituted, it's automatic human trafficking charge. And the feds will take that almost always. And the two biggest agencies that investigate human trafficking are Homeland Security Investigation, HSI, and the FBI.
Okay. Also, what about this? In different states, there's different ages of consent.
Yeah.
So on a state level, I believe, and we could Google it for New York age of consent.
It might be 17.
That is 17. Now, that's statewide. Obviously, the national age of consent federally is 18. Could Diddy have an argument to say, well, she came here willingly and the age of consent in New York is 17?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if his legal team doesn't try it. But they're going to say, hey, federally it's 18. So we'll see what happens. And I think that's where he's going to have to pay his defense team the big bucks to make that argument in court for him.
Wow. Okay, so all right, we get sex trafficking. So I think everybody who's spoken about this, and I've spoken to you, I've spoken to Bradford Cohen. I gotta get you with Bradford Cohen. Like, I'm telling you, like he's an invaluable mind that everything he's predicted when it comes to these proceedings have always been correct. And I think you and him, you guys are like, it would be like a power couple. Pause. Anyway.
Yeah, sure. But wait, she came from Michigan, you said, right?
Yes, she came from Detroit,
What's
Michigan.
the age of consent? 16 in Michigan? Okay, all right. I was just looking to see what the age of consent is in Michigan. But sorry, what was the next thing you wanted to hit?
Okay, so I guess we're looking at the litany of charges he could face. It appears that sex trafficking is going to be on the bill, right? There's been rumors about, the 1999 shooting, the club shooting, that supposedly, the woman who was shot in the face, who believes that Diddy was the one who pulled the trigger, but New York state did not charge Diddy with that crime. Instead, they blame it on Shine.
Yep.
That particular situation, we're hearing about the Tupac situation. We're hearing about maybe other, and I had said this earlier, but I want to get your take on it. Remember the first person when they did the raid that was arrested, the only person that was, arrested, not detained, was supposedly the drug mule.
Oh, yeah, the white guy.
And we hear a lot of drugs. Do we see maybe some drug charges kind of mixed into it? It kind of gives it some color. No, unfortunately, I'm not trying to just content this out, but just like it kind of makes it seem like, hey, it's not only sex trafficking. This is a drug-fueled environment. And then maybe could add some violence in with,
they would do it to pad up the racketeering, right? So when you're hitting people with Rico, right? Like, you have certain crimes in there that you want to show to establish that it's a criminal enterprise and they're committing crimes in furtherance of the organization, right? So, like I said, there's a couple different crimes that fall under the racketeering, right? Vehicle theft, extortion, murder, kidnapping, drug trafficking, etc. So what I predict is, right, we don't know the indictment yet. We'll see it tomorrow probably when it's unsealed, when he goes in front of the judge. They might put that in there to kind of pad that this is a component to the criminal organization, because some of these women that are victims, complained and said, oh yeah, I was under the influence of drugs. They were readily available to me, etc. So they can use that to kind of substantiate and prop up this RICO charge, because the reason why they're using the RICO is because the RICO allows them to bring in all these other cases in that might have been kind of fallen by the wayside due to statute of limitations. RICO allows them to bring it back in. It's kind of like the glue that holds everything together, if that makes sense.